All right, welcome back to the Krueg Show, everybody. Larry Krueger, Dan Cochimilio with us, and Ned Colletti, former Giants assistant general manager, former Dodgers general manager, with us tonight on the live stream. Ned, good to see you. Happy New Year. Happy 2023.
Good to see everybody.
Yeah, happy New Year, Ned.
Nice to see you guys and everybody.
My son, my oldest son, got me this T-shirt. I'm going to stand up and let you see it. This is one of my Christmas presents. It says,
"Oh, I can't disagree with that.
Barry Bonds is a Hall of Famer."
I agree with that 100%.
I don't think it's going to be too unpopular to say that in San Francisco, but maybe around the country there'll be people that will protest. But we wanted to have you on today because today is kind of a sad day for the Giants, and a day that I think is really. I didn't think this day was coming right now. I thought Sabes was going to be a part of the Giants going forward, but Brian Sabian officially is no longer in the Giants organization. He's one of the most decorated baseball executives in baseball history. In my opinion, he's a future Hall of Famer. And the Yankees announced that Sabes is coming back, where it all started for him. He's going to be the executive advisor to Brian Cashman, who's the GM of the Yankees. Sabes is now 66 years of age. He spent 30 seasons with the Giants organization and leading them to 3 World Series rings, 2010, 2012, 2014. Spent the past 4 seasons as the executive VP for the Giants. Previously spent 8 seasons with the Yankees, joining them in 1985 as a scout. And I think Sabes told me Bill Livesey was a guy that got him going there. He served as the Yankees director of scouting from 86 through 90. And in that era, they acquired guys like Bernie Williams, Derek Jeter, and others, Mariano Rivera, and really a lot of the core pillars of their dynasty that, won in what the Yankees won in 96, 98, 99, 2000, and then lost to the Diamondbacks in 2001, but had an incredible run under Joe Torre, who you hired, by the way, later on with the Dodgers. So you and Sabes' careers are intertwined. Before I lead you in any direction, just give me your thoughts on the news of the day.
Well, in a lot of ways, it is sad. It's another passing of the torch, so to speak, and him leaving the organization. I've stayed in touch with him on a weekly, monthly basis for really almost 25, 26 years. Not so much when I was GMing and he was GMing, a little bit different then. But since I left the GM,
Travis Denker for Mark Sweeney, isn't that the deal you guys made?
Well, oh yeah, that was a big one.
I think Sabes might have beat you on that one.
No, I don't think so. Sweeney's terrific, as a pinch hitter, as a player, as a person. But I think it's like even though he was not in the leadership role of the GM, of the president of baseball operation, still somebody that I will always associate with the Giants. And I think it's kind of sad that I think it's great for him. Don't get me wrong. Knowing him and knowing his passion for the sport and his drive to help and his drive to help build a champion. I'm ecstatic for him. Sorry for the organization and sorry for the passage of time that changed.
Yeah, okay, so my question would be, why? Bruce Bochy is a future Hall of Famer. Brian Sabian is a future Hall of Famer. They're no longer with the Giants. Why? Whose call is this?
Well, that's a good question. I don't have any idea whose call it is.
Whose call do you think it is?
Well, I think that when they change regimes and they change leadership, that they used him less. Just guessing. And, he's not somebody that just wanted to sit around and not do anything. He's somebody that has a ton of passion, a ton of energy. And, when we talk, we usually talk. it's an hour and a half, 2 hours about the game, about the sport, about players. So while he was on the sidelines, so to speak, he wasn't really on the side. He was on the sidelines, perhaps in the organization's approach, but not in his approach. And I think that when people change roles and new leadership comes in, they have their own ideas, and I don't know what their plan is. I haven't talked to Farhan since he left L.A., so I don't have any idea what their thoughts are, what their plans are. I just I just know the value that he has in my own career, in my own life, and I say this without exaggeration, guys. He is the smartest baseball person I've ever been around, way beyond almost. And I've been around a lot of great baseball people. Takes nothing away from anybody else, but I'm talking about somebody whose ability to project, whose ability to decision make, not just make the right decision or the wrong decision, how it looks in the rear view mirror, but to know when to make a decision was the best I have ever seen. And let me tell you something, these jobs are hard. And I know people are going to be critical. Well, good that he left. He didn't do this, he didn't do that. Since the team moved to San Francisco, there's 3 World Series championships. Coach managed 3, Sabe's GM 3. So people think it's easy only because they never had to do it. And fantasy league don't count. Okay. So, but he is the best executive mind in the game in my career. I don't even know who's second.
Yeah, Ned, it seems very strange that the Giants would go through that period, the 10 through 14, 3 World Series, 5 years, and then they kind of step away. And I can't imagine, a historic franchise like the Giants, 8 World Series titles. The Dodgers have 7, I believe. Could you ever see the Dodgers parting ways with a Tommy Lasorda or any of their legends that were part of that organization?
Well, certainly not Tommy Lasorda. And I think both franchises have done a great job of keeping former players involved. I can remember spending many days with Willie Mays, with many days with the late Willie McCovey, and on special occasions with Juan Marichal, Gaylord Perry, and a lot of people who were key members of that organization as far as being on the playing field. It's a different situation. Tommy was was a player years and years ago, but he was really the manager for many, many years and kind of the face of the franchise and one of the faces of baseball too. So I think it's a little bit different. I think the energy of an executive, they don't have a expiration date necessarily to as a player would have. When a player can't play anymore, player's done playing, and there's a different role perhaps. Executives, he's as sharp as can be, and to have so that is a bit of a difference. I wouldn't really put him in the same category of Lasorda. I respect the point, but a little bit different than that. And I think that when you have an organization that is in a certain direction, whatever that direction is, and I'm just speaking in generalities here. Sometimes there's not room for everybody, and sometimes the role somebody wants to play exceeds the role that's available, and perhaps that's what went on here. I don't know, but I do know that taking it to the house and retiring was not something he was looking to do at any point in time, and certainly in the last 30 some years, and his value I think would be immense. I had probably 5 or 6 different teams that I talked to since 2014 when I left the GM job. And he would have been my first hire if I could have gotten him away from the San Francisco Giants. He would have been the first hire because I don't know anybody else like him. I don't know anybody else that knows what he knows, has the vision he has, and the pulse, as we some guys have got their quick pulse, slow pulse, game pulse. You know what I'm talking about? As I said a couple minutes ago, his ability to know when it was the right time to do something was uncanny. I'd go to his office in spring training. We spent 360 days a year together, probably. And I would go to his office, maybe in spring training in Scottsdale Stadium, and say, "Hey, what about this guy? What about this player? What about that?" And he just kind of looked at me. Sometimes wouldn't say a word. And we get to the off season, and he go, "You remember when you came into my office back in March?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Now's the time. See if you can get something done." I mean, that to me is pretty special. With no conversation in between
Yeah.
about the topic.
When was the last time you talked to him?
Yesterday.
Okay, so you're talking to him all the time through the
Well,
last couple of years.
yeah. Maybe a week ago at length.
What was his role after Farhan showed up? What did he do?
I'm not exactly sure. I know that he had a lot of interaction with the amateur side, which was really his forte as a young executive and as a young person growing up in the sport. I think that's where he was used a lot, was to scout, to watch players, to chime in on who he liked and who he thought would be a good Giant. I think that's probably what he did most of the time. But again, I don't know for sure.
Do you know what he's going to do with Cashman and the Yankees?
I think he's going to be available for whatever Cash needs, whether it's player development, whether it's pro scouting, amateur scouting, international scouting. You know, the interesting part of being in a leadership role, probably in any company, but I can certainly speak to the leadership role in sport. When you're a general manager, you can have a lot of different conversations with a lot of different people, including your ownership, including your assistant GMs, including your scouting director, player development people, manager, coaches, everybody. Okay. But there's only another GM or a former GM that knows what it feels like to sit in that seat. So I'm certain that the conversations between Cash and Brian will be unique in that Cash has been there 25 years. I think he interned for Brian way back when. And you're talking about somebody that was in the GM chair for 19 or 20 years in San Francisco. That's a pretty powerful conversation. That's a lot of insight that nobody else can really have. And I think that is where the value comes. When I took over the Dodgers GM job, I didn't have that person. And what I did is Bill LaJoy, the late Bill LaJoy, he had taken over, he had GM'd the Tigers.
Long time in Detroit, right?
Yeah. And he was available. He had left Boston. He had worked for Theo for a while, and he had left Boston when Theo left for a minute and then came back. Bill left. And I didn't really know Bill that well, but I knew that I needed somebody who I could talk to, who had the experience of sitting in the seat and knowing what that's like to manage everybody in all directions. There's no position like it. And I think that invaluable. Bill is invaluable to me. And he and I did not have the relationship that Cash and Sabes have. So that'll be even a stronger relationship there. And I think it's invaluable. And I don't mean that in a way that nobody else can do it. But unless you run a company, unless you are the CEO of an industry, it's probably difficult to have the types of conversations that you really have to dig deep on with somebody who hasn't done it before, because they don't necessarily know all the thought process that goes into it. And I think that is invaluable. That is an invaluable part, in my opinion, to an organization. And I would always look to hire somebody that had that wisdom and could make me better because of their wisdom, because of their ability to question what I was doing, or to question my opinion, or to question my thought process, or to take my thought process further than I took it. And that was kind of our strength together for 11 years there. And I think that's something that he'll add to the Yankees. The Yankees ended up with Judge and Sabian.
Yeah,
pretty good.
Pretty good.
Month.
Giants were in 97 to 2004, 8 straight winning seasons that you were involved with there with Sabes. Yeah. And the Giants had obviously 10, 12, 14, and 16 made the playoffs. 17 and 18, they had down years. I was in a Twitter discussion today with someone who said the Giants won their championships 10 years ago. I'll repeat myself once again. When the Giants hired Zaidi, they were underperforming and outdated, and quotes the records in 17 and 18 and says both far worse seasons than Zaidi or Kapler have ever endured in San Francisco. A change was needed. And I'm sitting there saying, you got as you said, Ned, an all-time great, maybe the greatest mind that you've ever seen in baseball. Why would a team, after 2 years of down years, after such tremendous success, just blow it all up? What would be the reason for something like that?
I can't speak to that. I don't have any idea. And I want to be clear on this. Did he need to be the general manager to your Twitter person's approach? No, I don't think so. I'm not speaking for him, but I don't think so. I think he wanted to continue to stay involved and help the franchise. To what extent he was able to do that, I don't know. I know that he did some work in amateur, but I think that there's change that occurs. Happened with me, happened with him, and you accept that. And then you have the second step of that. Well, then do you have a role? Do you have a chance to continue to contribute without ego getting involved and things like that? And do you have that chance? And that's really the question. I can't agree with the quotes you just read from Twitter. Yeah, a couple bad years. He'd been doing it since 1997. That's a long time to be sitting in that seat. And Bobby Evans had been with him for a long time. So, Bobby, I guess, was there, but maybe 15 or 16 as a GM, 17, 18. I can't remember exactly what the timeline was. But again, he had stepped back a little bit when Bobby was the GM. But again, stepping back is different than stepping out. Okay. And I think that.
Right. Yeah. And the problem that I have with the whole analytics, I think analytics have been a part of baseball for as long as baseball's existed. It's advanced scouting and whatever you want to call it. There's been analytics, but the overuse of analytics is what I think is detrimental. You have to have a balance. I mean, look at 2014 Game 7. Do you think Mad Bum would have pitched those innings if analytics were being run today by the Giants? There's no way.
No, probably not. Well, and your point, and I believe this in so many aspects of life. The most successful groups in any walk of life, and family or whatever, or in business or in sport, are those that are balanced. And that to have the balance of intellect, the balance of analytics with the balance of the human approach, with the balance of scouting by the eye, so to speak, the eye test. I think balance is what wins. And I don't have any idea what the balance is there. I don't have any idea what the balance is in LA, but I sense that those teams that are successful, they use everything. They use every piece of information they can find, be it scouting with your eyes and your experience, or looking at charts and predicting the future through analytics, or any other way. I think leaders are, I think it's their due diligence to use every possible means, including analytics. And you're right about it. It's been around a long time, not to the extent that they are today, or the depth that they are today. I worked for a guy named Jimmy Fry in Chicago, who was a coach for Earl Weaver back in the 1970s. Earl Weaver had him keep hitter-pitcher matchups, how guys did late, how guys did with runners in scoring position. They kept the spray chart for shifting purposes. Nobody shifts as much as the game has shifted the last 6-7 years. But all those things weren't invented in the last 15 years. They were used differently. And granted, analytics today is far deeper and far more predictable than it ever was. But it's not like people didn't know hitter-pitcher matchups, or left, right, home, road, day, night, close, late, all those different things. They've been keeping track of that for decades.
Yeah.
It's just right now what you have is just a very strict adherence to certain analytics. That's really the point. Nobody ever talks about that. All analytics is information. Information's been used forever. But like, for giving an example, the Dodgers Tampa World Series, where Kevin Cash pulls Blake Snell. that was a strict adherence to pitching analytics. He had a analytic that's a stat that basically said that, at a certain point in the game, a certain pitch count, that Blake Snell normally gets hit hard at that point, but it doesn't take into account adrenaline. He was having an all-time night. He had a one-hitter going. And the analytics, if you looked at, you say, well, what about the analytics? What about the other analytics in that call? I believe the 3 hitters that the Dodgers had coming up to face Snell the next inning were all combined 0 for 12 with 8 strikeouts in that game. So there's some analytics that say maybe you ought to keep Snell in. So was there an adherence to analytics? Yeah, but it was also a adherence to strict pitching, a specific pitching statistic, and that obviously developed some kind of belief in Kevin Cash, or probably the general manager who passed it down to Kevin Cash, and they'd said, if we get in this situation, this is the way we want to do it. And I thought they did the opposite of what Boch did in Game 7 in 2014. Boch didn't ignore what he was seeing. He prioritized what he was seeing over what he knew about Santiago Casilla and whatever else, other options he had. And, Boch had a very clear mind. And I always feel like in October, the manager that has a game plan and, executes it best. He didn't just pull Tim Hudson and go to Mad Bum. He pulled Tim Hudson and went to a reliever in Jeremy Affeldt, got out of that inning, settled the game down, and then went to Bumgarner, and probably was only going to use Bumgarner for 3 innings, but then said, you know what? I don't trust anybody more. And he's in a rhythm. And at that point, I mean, it was probably going to take something significant to get him out of the game. And Boch, of course, has got the ring on his finger to prove that he made the right call.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Ned, I've got a question.
Well, hold on a second, Danny. Hold on,
Danny.
Hold on. Let's go back on Sabes for a second, because that's what we're having you on today to talk about Sabes. 18 years as the Giants GM, longest run by a Giants general manager in the history, surpassing Spec Richardson, Al Rosen, Tom Haller. And his .534 win percentage career, 10th all time among GMs since 1950 for guys who have served at least a decade. So he was a proven winner. I think it's really interesting that he got the Executive of the Year in 2003. But as a hardcore Giants fan, I think he really deserved it in 2002. When you guys picked up Kenny Lofton, the offense in 2002 was a good offense, but it was starting to it was reeling a little bit towards the end of the year. And if you go back and chart it, you'll see that you guys went from scoring barely 4 runs a game to over 6 runs a game, and finished strong and carried that momentum right on through the playoffs. And it was that deal for, Felix Diaz and somebody else for Kenny Lofton that had a profound impact on the lineup. And I think it's interesting. I know you guys won 100 in 2003, and there were a number of good moves that year as well. Jose Cruz and others. But man, if it was me, I would say Sabe's greatest years were like 97 and 2002. You were there for all of it. What do you think?
Well, I think that you make a good point. It could have been any of those years. And it certainly could have been 10, 12, and 14 too. There's so many years that he should have been not just a candidate, but should have probably won it. If you're talking about a Hall of Fame potential general manager, which I think we all believe he is, you're telling me he won 1 Executive of the Year in 18 years? Yeah. That to me is a lot of oversight on my peers that didn't select him, because it's typically a vote of the GMs. And one thing about Brian, that he never sought the spotlight, and he wasn't big in the media type of thing. He was almost somebody who you had to pay attention to. And if you paid attention to the moves, and if you paid attention to certain things, then you developed a great appreciation for him. But you had to pay attention. because he wasn't going to tell you how good he was. He wasn't going to stand on the soapbox and say, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. Not his style. And the Kenny Lofton deal was a huge deal. But you could probably go back in all of those years, 97, no doubt. Think of the team. He moved up to the GM spot that year. I moved up to the assistant GM spot that year, following the 96 season. The 95 and the 96 seasons. We struggled. And his first major deal, he had to trade an icon in Matt Williams, okay, and started to build the team out of that. Think about, there's no doubt that 97 was a miraculous year, a miraculous turnaround. The number of players acquired, signed, the late Darrell Hamilton, Jeff Kent, Jose Vizcaino, Julian Tavares, on and on and on. And then the big White Sox deal at the end of July that year for Wilson Alvarez, Roberto Hernandez, and Danny Darwin. I mean, that year right there, to your point, Larry, executive of the year. I mean, how much more do you have to do? You started with 95, 96 losses, maybe 2 consecutive years in that range, plus 90 defeats. And then you go in and you end up winning the West.
Oh, and it's not just that. They went from, I think it was 94 losses in 96 to 90 wins in 97 and the playoff berth. But it also began an 8-year stretch between 97 and 2004. And if you go check that 8-year stretch, it's one of the most successful stretches, if not the most successful stretch in the history of the Giants franchise. The Giants between 97 and 2004 averaged 92 wins per year. And Brian and yourself, made a number of deals involving, young players that just never really came of age elsewhere, that you guys got great players out of. Obviously, you mentioned Matt Williams trade that brought Kent, but Armando Rios was, I think, a key cog in the Jason Schmidt trade.
Yes.
Mick Pegler and Mike Villano were key cogs in the Rob Nen trade. I mentioned before Felix Diaz for Kenny Lofton. Andres Galarraga was brought over in a trade. Ellis Burks was brought over in a trade. I think Jim Stoops might have gone back. Joe Carter, the white flag, getting Roberto Hernandez, Wilson Alvarez, Danny Darwin, that Mike Caruso trade, adding Jose Mesa. I mean, there were a number of deals there where you guys traded young prospects that a lot of people thought were going to be good. And I guess Joe Nathan emerged in Minnesota, but Francisco Liriano, I guess, emerged. But for the most part, Kurt Ainsworth for Sidney Ponson, and we could go on and on and on. To me, I thought the best general manager season I've ever seen was Al Rosen in 1993 or 1987, where he traded for Russell and then Don Robinson, Mitchell, Leffert, Stravecki, and took a Giants team that wasn't that great. And his trades kind of fueled the entire season. But Sabes had a great eye for which young players to move, and he rarely, if ever, got burned.
How about in 12? Scudero and Pence.
Yes. It's one of the most important aspects of that job. You really need to know your own system and your own players and what your expectation is and what your franchise expectation is. Not everybody can be a Giant. Not everybody can be a Dodger. Okay. Everybody can be a Yankee or a Red Sox or a Philly or a Cub. There's certain places that the expectations are where they are, and not everybody can live up to it. Doesn't mean they're not good players, but you're talking about seeking a championship caliber and to know your own players in your system, and to be able to say, you know what, going to play in the big leagues, going to be a good player perhaps, but you know what, we got a chance to win it. One of the things that both he and Dallas Green, my first boss, talk to me all the time about is when we have a chance to win, you got to get after it. You got to go for it. You can't do it halfway. You got a chance to win. You know your team. They deserve it. The Galarraga deal is one of the big ones. But we were scuffling. And suddenly, he goes out and gets Andres. And boom, off we go. But knowing your own players is invaluable. You can't be successful, in my opinion, without really knowing your system and knowing who can or who can't. before the other team knows they can't.
True. That's a good point. Before the other team, I got a question to the fans. A lot of people in the chat would like to know. You and Sabes pretty close in age, a couple years apart. He's got a burning desire to still be in the game, be involved. If some team calls you in 2023 and says, Ned, we want to make you, head of our front office to run the show or advise, do you have any interest?
Certainly, I would love to do it, but that doesn't mean I'm begging to do it, or my life won't be complete if I don't do it. I've got 40 years in with 3 iconic franchises, and I'm at peace with where I'm at. That said, I'm a lot like Sabes in that we both love to compete, and we both love the challenge of taking something that we think could be better and helping people around us get better. I think that a lot of pride from him and a lot of pride from myself, it goes to those young people or those people who we have had in our organizations that have gone on to do great things. And I think that, that type of opportunity you just talked about, Danny, is one of those things. So sure. And in that vein, I would consider it. Do I need to do it for ego or for any other reason? Never in a million years. But if I have a chance to help anybody at any point in time? Absolutely. I mean, that's why I teach at Pepperdine, because I have a chance to give somebody maybe an ounce of wisdom that they could take someplace else and be better off for it. So in those situations, yes. For an ownership that had no desire to win, I don't have a minute of time for that.
We're talking to Ned Colletti on our live stream today, and we're talking about Brian Sabean. If you missed the story, Sabes is going from the Giants to the Yankees, to where it all began for him. And Sabes was a baseball scout for the Yankees organization in the mid 80s, and the scouting director, I think, promoted in the mid 80s, 86, became vice president development of scouting for them in 90. And when he was there with the Yankees, he drafted Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera, JT Snow, Jorge Posada, Andy Pettit, came to the Giants in 93, serving as the GM and vice president of scouting and player personnel. And he replaced Bob Quinn. Was it Quinn that I know Bill Livesey was a guy, Sabian went to Concord High School and Eckerd College in St. Petersburg, Florida. He played with Joe LaFay. And then he was the field manager of the Yarmouth Dennis Red Sox on the Cape. And then he was assistant baseball coach at St. Leo's in the late 70s, head of the baseball coach at University of Tampa in the early 80s, and then was the head coach there at 83 and led them to their first ever NCAA regional tournament appearance. And I know Bill Livesey was a guy that was, a kind of a wise scout that Sabes was close to, and I think brought him to the Yankees, if I remember correctly. But what is the connection with Bill Livesey? What is the connection with Bob Quinn? Because I know Bob Quinn was the guy that brought Sabes west, right?
Yes. I think when you have the type of career that Brian has had, there's many people along the way. There's crossroads that always come up, that somebody either decides to help or somebody decides to turn their back and look the other way. No doubt Livesey was huge in Brian's early development, as was Gene Michael, who was the GM of the Yankees and the manager of the Yankees for a while. And some of that I knew from Chicago, who was managing there for a couple of seasons.
Do they call him Stick? Is that what they call him? Stick?
Yeah. We, at winter meetings when I was with Sayers, we'd run into Gene all the time and end up, sitting around for a couple hours talking about either, his short period of time with the Cubs or his long period of time with the Yankees. Somebody who, and, it's not always big names that make major differences. You may remember the name Joe DiCarlo, who was a scout.
One of your guys' scouts, right?
When Brian first went to the Yankees and started to be in New York more instead of being in Florida as an area scout, he spent endless days with Joe DiCarlo. Joe was a scout. He scouted players mainly in the New York and New England area, but he had great wisdom to him. And so Sabes learned a lot from Joe DiCarlo. And then Bob Quinn. I think the story goes, Bob Quinn may have called Sabes for permission to talk to somebody in the Yankees organization. And Sabes had enough in New York. And he says, well, if you consider it, I have another name for you. And he said, who? And he said, me. And so, that I think that may be folklore, it might be fact. But Bob Quinn played a major role for both Sabes and me. And, he was somebody who gave Sabes a lot of leadership responsibilities, a lot of leeway to start to build those Giants teams. And, they both had a hand in me coming west. And I had, and Sabes pushed for it a little bit more because I had actually turned the Giants down after I saw the cost of living in San Francisco. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't bring my family there, and I couldn't figure out a way to do it. And I remember coming down to Phoenix for the GM meetings and talking to both of them. And I actually went up and flew up to the Bay Area, which I knew fairly well from coming in with the Cubs. But, you never know an area until you start to look to live there. Then you really start to figure it out. And I spent a couple of days up there, and I couldn't afford to do it. And I came back to Scottsdale where the GM meetings were, and I told Brian and Bob that I was honored for the offer, but I couldn't afford to make this move. And it wasn't a matter of $1,000 or $3,000. I mean, it was a massive gap. And so we got to Sky Harbor Airport. I'll never forget it. And I thanked him. I got out of the car, and Sabes got out. I shook hands with Bob Quinn, and Sabes shook hands with him. And he and I didn't know each other that well. What we knew of each other is neither one of us ever looked to feather our nest some other place. You go to GM meetings, there's always a group of people that's trying to get their next gig while they got a current gig. He was never like that. And I was never like that. And so we had this great respect for each other without really knowing each other. I got out of the car at Sky Harbor, and he says, we got to figure out how to make this work. I says, well, it's not that I don't want to do it. I just can't afford to do it. And he says, I'll talk to you. And within a day or so, he called me and he says, how about if we let you live out, if you work out of Chicago, you come to San Francisco 1 week a month on our dime, you spend a week with the team on the road, and you can spend 2 weeks running around America or being in Chicago, whatever you need to do. Why don't we try this out? Because we really want to hire, we really need you. And so I says, you got it. So that's how I started. I actually turned them down the first time, and he came back with this other idea. And by the time we got to June in the draft, I was all in, and decided to make it a longer commitment with the help of Peter McGowan and Larry Baer, and then Sabes, who was always a big proponent. Nobody taught me more than Sabes, and I think that we fed off each other. I think it was one of those iron sharpens iron situations. My strengths were not necessarily his strengths. His multitude of strengths were better than mine, and so I think that we both learned a lot from each other. The amount of days that we would walk the streets of a city trying to figure out how to make the organization better, how to make the team better, numerous. You got 81 road games, probably 60 nights a year. We would walk almost till dawn trying to figure out how to make it better. And yeah, there's a couple trades that didn't work out, a sign that doesn't work out. We've all got that.
Sure.
I tell you what, nobody's got to be in that chair for as long as he was and as successful as he was and what he did for an organization. Because as you guys remember, when he got there, that organization had just barely stayed there, had almost moved to Tampa.
Yeah.
And think about what has transpired in those 30 years since. Because I know where it was. And that kind of hindered me a little bit. I came a couple years later. But that kind of hindered my thought process too. There was no Pac Bell Park, SBC Park, AT&T Park, Oracle Field. None of that was there when I got there, and none of that was there on the board when he got there. So think about the impact.
Very, very interesting times, and it's Cashman, has always been a fan of Sabes, and here's the quote from Cashman in 2018. He's talking about Brian. He says, his name's on the 96, 98, 99, and 2000 championships as much as anybody else's, if not more, actually. And he's the guy. Jeter, Mariano, Posada, Pettit, Bernie Williams. They don't win. That's their core. That is the Yankees championship core.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you, because you were there with him, And yet, throughout the 90s, you guys had great success. You were competitive most years. You helped kind of solidify the franchise to help it get its financial footing set with the building of the ballpark. It's a totally different equation now as far as revenue compared to what you guys were dealing with. But to me, it was interesting that it was always good. Sabe's, I thought his initial success and your guys' initial success was a lot of times predicated on making these something for nothing trades. Fausto Macy and Alan Watson for JT Snow, and deals that were really just great trades for the Giants. And I think you guys, so much of the Giants' success in the 90s was fueled by the trades that you and Brian consummated. But eventually, I think everybody kind of knew. I mean, you and I discussed it many times that if the team was ever really going to climb to the top of the mountain, they were going to have to get it done in the amateur draft at a higher level than was getting done in his early tenure there. And somehow it got done. Here comes Pablo, then Buster, Bumgarner, Kane, Lincecum, and all of a sudden, they had a nice little run. In the same way, Jeter, Mariano, Posada, Pettit, and Bernie were the core of the Yankees' 3 championships. Those guys I just named were the core of the Giants' 3 championships. I'm just kind of wondering, was there ever a change in the philosophy as far as the minor leagues, or was there a new addition scouting-wise or personnel-wise that helped you guys? Because clearly you guys got into, or maybe when you were there, maybe you was right between when you were there and left, but right there towards a good chunk of the time into his tenure, the farm system started to produce, and they produced some blue chip players that became the core of their title teams. I'm just kind of wondering, was there ever any kind of a minor league change in philosophy? Because that core of players really wasn't there, and you guys had to make trades to survive in the mid to late 90s.
Well, it's you're right on. It's a great observation. John Barr joined the organization from the Dodgers as a scouting director. Dick Tidrow, the late Dick Tidrow, one of my dearest friends, huge role in all of this. Huge role in the drafting, and especially of the pitching and the development of the players. It can never be understated what Dick Tidrow did for this organization. I think also they had a couple of down years, maybe 05, 06, somewhere in there. And so they got a chance to draft high. I think we drafted Kershaw 7th in the 06 draft. I think Tim was drafted 10th, I think, somewhere in there. And Madison, I think, was a high pick. Buster was a high pick. So that doesn't mean that's easy. It just means that when you win and you're drafting in the late 20s, you don't have the same choices as you do in the top 5 or top 10. But you still got to hit on those, and you still got to develop them. And one thing about the Giants that I've seen since my entire career, they have, for the most part, their teams have a grit to them. They've got a little bit of a grit to them. Maybe it's the weather. Maybe it was Candlestick Park. Maybe it was they were always sitting at a payroll far less than the Dodgers. Whatever it was, they always had that. And what Dick Tidrow and John Barr and Brian did is they found good amateur players that were high skills, that had that perseverance and that grit to them.
Ned, in 97 to 04, the team had 8 winning seasons in a row. Then they had some down years, 05 through 08. 2009, they started to come back up, and then all the way through 2016. So you got these cycles, and then 17 and 18 are down. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that Sabes would have turned this thing back around, and the Giants would be right today, probably on near the top again, because it is cyclical, isn't it? Because you can't keep drafting 30th and be getting the top guys all the time. But if you have that down period for 3 to 4 years, I mean, as competitive as Sabes is, wouldn't you see the team back at or near the top again if this was the cycle?
Well, it's tough to predict that, but again,
But I mean, knowing the man,
yeah, I
he never
mean,
failed.
you know
I mean,
how
he
I
never
feel.
really.
You know how I feel about him and the career that he's had and the value that he brings. Something we talked about all the time, and it's so very true. And yeah, sometimes you're going to go through the cycle, but baseball is probably the toughest sport to win and develop at the same time. It's tough to do that. I'm seeing it in the NHL. You have a salary cap, so you better win when that window's open because you're going to end up with a period of time where your best players are starting to make more money than your cap will allow percentage wise, and it is tough to win and develop at the same time. Dodgers have done remarkable at it the last 15, 16 years, I think, but it's rare to do that, and so you're going to have that cyclical thing. I think that the difference he can make in any organization is extreme in a positive way. And I think sometimes, after you've done, and this may go back to one of our earlier points in conversation, when you've done something as long as he did it in that seat, he probably needed a breath. He probably needed to take a breath, and that's when he stepped back, and that's when Bobby came in, and so he took a lesser role, perhaps. But just because you need a breath doesn't mean you're done breathing.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you've had enough and you're never coming back and you're never going to do it again. To get these jobs, to have these types of careers, you have to have passion, huge passion with intellect, with the ability to make decisions, with the ability to read people, to negotiate, not just contracts, but people. And I think the whole situation is at some point in time, you need a break, you need a breath. And I think that's probably what he did when Bobby came in and took over for a while. But again, that doesn't mean he was going to take the breath for the last 30, 40 years of his life. No, that means he took a breath for a minute or two.
It's interesting. You guys were such a successful team because I think you did have different skill sets. And, you guys were both obviously because you became the general manager of the Dodgers, completely capable of running your own show independent of one another. But together, you guys really were terrific. I always got the sense that Brian, and you and I have had many conversations, and yet I've never asked you this, but I've always got the sense that Brian just stomached the media, but really didn't enjoy that aspect of it. And that your ability to be so good with the media was took a ton of things that he did not want to do. He did not want to talk to Larry Krueger. But you did. I don't know if you wanted to, but you did do the interviews. And the fan base benefited. And I remember Tony Salvador, who ran KMBR for years, used to say to me, "Man, you got some great stuff with Colletti last night. I was in the car, I couldn't get out of the car." He'd give me that kind of stuff, and he'd be like, "It always amazes me, Ned. He talks like he could absolutely be the general manager himself. Like, he's totally empowered. Like, he doesn't sound at all like he's the second guy." And I always just wondered if Brian ever you guys set kind of ground rules or how you wanted things to go, because many conversations that we had, it wasn't like you said, "Well, I really can't say anything. I got to check with Sabes," or, maybe that's a better question for Brian. You always just gave just straight answers and never kind of begged out because Brian was the GM and you were the assistant GM. And I just was wondering if you guys had an agreement or if he empowered you in a way that maybe if he hadn't, you wouldn't have felt that independence. It worked. I'm just kind of wondering the behind the scenes. Was there any behind the scenes like, "Hey, why do you do so much media?" Or was like, thank you, Ned, for doing all this, so I don't have to do it. You were very independent and strong on the air, and the presentation was very, very much like you could have been the general manager, and yet he held the title. How did that work out behind the scenes?
Well, I think it just kind of was organic and it evolved that way. Um, I think that I read from his body language in our conversations, he'd rather be working on the team than trying to make Larry Krueger think that he knew what he was doing. I think he would let his work speak for itself. Um, and I think the one of the greatest gifts that he gave me was giving me opportunity to do just about everything in the job. I think during our tenure together, which was over a decade, I think he may have negotiated one contract. I think he negotiated Osvaldo Fernandez's contract out of Cuba because he was down in that part of the world, and it was a real touch and go situation and a real quick negotiation. But he empowered me to do that. When I got to LA, the first trade I made was trading Milton Bradley for Andre Ethier. That wasn't the first trade I made, though. I probably made 15 or 20 with his blessing and with his guidance, but he let me do it. He let me go and do the deal for Kenny Lofton. He let me do the deal for Randy Wynn later and a handful of other ones. He wasn't territorial in the least, which I think is such a tremendous trait of his leadership. He had no insecurity to how good he is, and he had no insecurity to letting his second in command take the lead in some areas. I never did nothing without his blessing, without him knowing where we were at. But he allowed me to really become a general manager, because it wasn't like the first free agent I signed, whether it was Kenny Lofton again or Nomar or Raphael, I can't remember, Billy Miller. I had done 400 deals before that. I knew the market. I knew how to negotiate. I knew how to do all those things because he gave me that leeway. And he gave me the leeway to make deals with his blessing and with his understanding. Like I told you the story, sometimes I go to him in February or March in spring training and say, hey, we ought to think about getting this guy. And he'd just look at me. And then in November, he'd say, you remember when you came to me? Go make it happen. Boom. I mean, not just anybody does that. And people are so territorial in their power positions that they never train. Most people never train anybody to take their place, so to speak. But he never, ever worried about that. Never even gave it a second thought. I had a contract term, my last deal with the Giants. I had successor language in there to become the GM if he ever left. He knew it. He didn't say, I don't want that in there. But that is as many things as he taught me, and as many things as I learned in his company just by observing, his kindness and his gifting of opportunity to me is something I'll never, ever forget. My greatest times were working next to him. 40 years, 10 or 11 next to him, that's a quarter. Those were my greatest days. Loved the city, loved the organization. Ownership was phenomenal with me. But the guy I worked side by side with for more than a decade became a brother, became a friend, and became somebody that gave me opportunity and wasn't afraid to. And for that, I will be eternally grateful forever, as will my family. Because trust me, it is rare. And it is certainly rare in professional sport, where egos, insecurities, and things like that run the roost. Not what saves.
It's awesome to hear. Romo 2001, guys, says a $10 donation. Said, Ned, there are fans who are not elated with the current Giants roster and the current Giants baseball operations. From your expertise outside the organization and outside the organization opinion, do fans have a valid reason to doubt the current state of the Giants club?
Well, it's tough for me to chime in on that from the outside. Even if I was on the inside, it'd be tough for me to chime in on that. I think you got to let things play out. I think, and I'll use the example of my conversations with veteran players. And I had to release veteran players. Tough to do. But as I would tell them, the game is telling you where you're at. The season will tell a team where it's at. And I think that's all you can really go by. And, I've known this team to play hard. It plays hard for Gabe. I think that's always a benefit when that happens. But I think the season will tell the story. I don't think anybody knows. I think the Korea thing was, and I said it on this show, that I can understand if you cannot get insurance because of a pre-existing, or if the medical is too severe. Yeah, you shouldn't be doing it. You shouldn't be calling a press conference either. It's something else I said, and having a player in the city, kind of the cart before the horse. But the decision making on Correa, we're seeing it. As of right now, I don't know. He hasn't signed yet, has he?
No,
No,
not yet.
that's a
You know,
question I have for you. If you're the current general manager of the Giants and the situation with Correa is happening, and I guess technically other clubs can still talk to him.
yeah.
And you feel like his health is good enough, you've got his records for a shorter term deal. Are you aggressively talking to Scott Boras, or are you letting him kind of call you?
I think that Scott knows where every team is at. The Giants obviously had an interest in the player, not for the term, not for the dollars, based upon whatever. But I think that if they have an interest in a different type of deal, I think they've conveyed that. I think there's probably other teams that have.
What do you do as a GM though? If you have a shot at still getting him, are you aggressively calling Scott and saying, let's get a deal done? Or we really want to get a deal done? Or are you letting it just kind of play out?
Well, you can never do that in negotiation where you're so aggressive. And an agent's going to read it, not just Scott, an agent's going to read your aggressiveness by what you're saying. How many years, how much money, how aggressive. You can call every 15 minutes. If you're offering a year at $5 million, you could call every second. It ain't going to make any difference. So it's got every negotiation's got a different tenor to it, a different speed to it, different conversation to it. But I'm as certain as I can be from sitting on the outside. Scott knows what the Giants would do. And, once you get to that point, the only other call you're going to make is a check in, see where he's at, see if there's any reason to have a conversation, or to tell him that, hey, you know what, we're going to do something else and our deal's off the table. Because until you say a deal's done, until you reject something, the deal lives. So, but I think that everybody knows. I think Scott knows where everybody is. But again, he had 13 and 350 at one point and 12 and 300 at another point, right?
Right, 315, yeah.
Yeah. So, for him to take 3 and, something else is, he's going to fight not to do that, I would think. No, knowing Scott, he's not going to acquiesce until he absolutely has to. And when does he absolutely have to? Knowing, he knows the entire market, I'm sure. He knows what other choices teams have. If they've said, we've got this, we'll offer you this, but we're going to do something else may not be out there. And he's brilliant at what he does. So it's a chance that, he knows what he can and can't do. And he's probably waiting to do what's best for his player.
Have you ever had a deal canceled because you pulled out because of the medicals? And like, as a general manager, where in the process of a trade or a signing do you consult the medicals? I mean, do you get them months ahead of time? Is it days ahead of time? And was there one doctor with the Giants or one doctor with the Dodgers that you said, hey, have this guy look at it? It seems to be a lot of, just a whole category of confusion.
The way I would do it is I would start maybe a year out, or at least the spring training of the year of a potential free agent. And I would alert the training staff, keep your eye on this player. Because a player may not go on the IL, or in the old days, the DL, but still not be healthy. Pitcher could miss a start, not go on the IL.
Study, when you say keep an eye, you study his utilization,
Study
see how
his
often they're
utilization.
using him. Are they resting him? Are they,
we'll study his arm slot. You can analytically study an arm slot. You may have a base run, somebody that's got good speed, above average speed, that every time they're on first base, they're going to get that secondary lead, and their ability to steal a base or their ability to go first to third, even first to home, is special. But suddenly you see them going base at a time. You see them just pulling up a little. They may never miss a game. They may have 600 at bats, but you notice that they don't go first to third like they used to. Or maybe it's their range. Maybe it's their first step. You don't see this attention to detail. And you do it all season long. And your medical does it all season long. Because if you just, anybody can go on the internet and look at some players day by day and say, oh, he was on the IL for 30 days in June. Or he was on the, but you have to pay attention to this in real time. And then when you got to the end of the season, you'd have your meetings and you'd get to medical and you'd say, this is what I know. What do you know? You guys, I've asked you to pay attention to it. So you learn something there. And then you call the agent if it's a free agent and you've done all your homework. And at that point in time, you ask for the medicals, permission to see the medicals. Typically, you would get a password. You go into a database, you see it, and you show it to your orthopedic specialist. You show it to your internist. If it's a different type of issue, you show it to the people who you trust for an opinion. And you do all that. And then you get through your negotiation and you do a letter of agreement if you're successful in obtaining the player, at least a letter of agreement piece of it, contingent on passing a physical at your own with your own doctors. Then you bring the player in and you have a physical or 2 or 3 days of tests and different things. And that's how you do it. And then after all of that, if everything checks out, then you schedule a press conference.
Interesting.
Right.
You're
That's just my opinion.
yeah. My orthopedic down here in Arizona actually says he's part of the Giants, and he said he doing the Dodgers as well. And I was wondering if he was, maybe you took him to the Dodgers, Dr. Doring.
No, it's sometimes in spring training teams use the same orthopedic. The Dodgers have got their own group of orthopedics up in the LA area. Giants have their group. But again, a doctor is not supposed to be prejudicial towards a certain team. So sometimes, like the Dodgers have Neil Elatrash from Curl and Joe, one of the most famous orthopedics and one of the best in the world. Other teams send players to him all the time.
Oh, sure.
He doesn't tell us what's going on. It's not, he can't tell us. It's against the law.
Right.
To tell us, well, this guy's got a bad elbow. I saw him a year ago. You can't do that.
But did the Angels in 2002 know that Rob Nen was not 100% in the World Series?
Well, I think we all knew that. He had died on the sword, and he gave everything he had. Always did, always will. But yeah, he wasn't completely healthy at that point in time.
It wasn't his doctor, their team doctor, because he's an Orange County guy. I thought that was the story. Let me ask you this one. Will Martinez has $4.99 chat. He says, Ned, how close did Sabes come to trading Lincecum for Alexis Rios? Also, do you see baseball eventually moving away from FT analytics back to old school
full-time
analytics back to an old school GM approach? Did Sabes ever get close on Alexis Rios for Lincecum? I know it was discussed.
I don't know.
Probably.
I had left by the time Tim was drafted, so I don't know what. I don't know where it was at. As far as going back to the old way, so to speak, I don't see that happening. I see probably more balance. I think the hiring of Boats tells you a little bit of the story. The guy that won the World Series this past year, I'm sure Dusty uses analytics from time to time, but I don't think he uses them,
as much as some
in the fifth inning of Game 6 to pull out a guy with a one hitter. I think that we're starting to see that there is value in experience.
Absolutely.
There's value in having one. There's value in understanding who's in the uniform.
That's a good thing for some of us old timers that have been around watching baseball, because I tell you,
analytics will always have a major part in the role, as well it should. But as I said earlier tonight, the balance is what I think is invaluable. I'm known as an old school guy too, an old, somebody who didn't value analytics. Nothing could be further from the truth. my career took off because of analytics. I told you about Jim Fry and Earl Weaver. Jim Fry started managing the Cubs in 1984. He came to me and said, I did this as a coach. I need you to start to do this. So we were owned by Tribune Company at that point in time. I got a program writer. We wrote one of the first analytical programs probably in the history of the sport. Nobody didn't talk about it. We didn't tell anybody about it. We just used it. And it was archaic compared to what people have today. It was cutting edge compared to what people had in the mid 80s. But, that's just a misnomer about my perspective. I believe in balance. I would never turn away truthful information from any source. I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I did it.
I mean, the whole job is information based. I mean, I'll give you one where were you in 86?
Chicago.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you because the Cubs in May of 84 traded Bill Buckner, who was a great Cub, to the Red Sox.
Yes.
And they got Dennis Eckersley and Mike Brumley.
Yes.
And Eckersley was a pretty good 6-inning starter who would tire out there for the Cubs in 85, 86. And if I guess there was no way to know that he had checked himself into a rehab clinic for alcoholism. But man, Sandy Alderson, April 3rd of 87, makes a trade with the Cubs and brings Dennis Eckersley as a 6-inning starter to Oakland and just stuck him in the pen as rotation insurance. And then he emerges as the greatest closer maybe of all time. And I'm just kind of wondering, it's like, did you guys know that Dennis had an alcohol problem there in the mid 80s? And did you know that he had beaten it between, in the off season? Because he said he showed up in spring training and he was a totally different guy. And everybody knows how talented he was as a young player with the Indians. What do you remember about Eck with the Cubs and that whole thing in the mid 80s?
Eck is one of my favorite players of all time. When we acquired Eck, we traded, as you say, Bill Buckner, great hitter, great Cub, great baseball player. Sadly passed a couple years ago. We had Leon Durham, who we had been playing in the outfield. We needed to give Leon a chance to play first base, his natural position, and get at bats there. And we needed more starting pitching, even if it was somebody that could go 5-6 innings in Eck. And so we acquired him. And great competitor, huge competitor. And I don't know what we knew, what we didn't know. I suspect that we knew some things. Did we know everything? Probably not. What led to the trade to Oakland? I don't have any idea. I wasn't in the room for that. But obviously it was a turning point. An ex-career was having a really good career ahead of that with Cleveland and Boston. And was probably not a Hall of Famer until he went to Oakland and went to the bullpen. But he's got a no-hitter on his resume, and he won a lot of games in that position. Plus, he'd compete. He would compete to the utmost. So I know the first part of the deal. I know how he was acquired. I don't necessarily know how he was traded.
There was Carol in here says, I'll never forget Sabe's passion and emotion when they won it all in 2010. And I'll tell you, I used to love when Sabes would get on with Ralph on KMBR because Ralph just had a million neurotic questions. And, I remember we had one soundbite.
I hear it. I hear Ralph's voice coming.
One of the sound bites, and he'd be like, hey, Brian, what about Saltalamacchia? And you hear Sabes go, why? Just disgusted, right? Disgusted. What about Saltalamacchia? You really like Saltalamacchia? But Ralph, I forget the year, but he went in every day on Armando Benitez. And Sabian finally traded Benitez. And I forget exactly I forget exactly how the trade came down, but he went on KMBR and Ralph, to do a segment with Ralph and Tom. And, Sabes was clearly pissed that Ralph had kind of, I don't want to say poison the waters, but that he had put public pressure by talking about the struggles of Benitez over and over. And he's like, Sabes was like, Ralph, you're going to have to find yourself a new whipping boy because, he's like, he's just like, because, I don't know. And it's like, he was disgusted by that whole thing. I'm just kind of wondering, you're a passionate guy. He's a passionate guy. You've already referenced spending hours walking after games. What is the most anger that you've ever seen from him, and maybe yourself, if you could share it during your entire tenure working together? It probably was on some 2:00 in the morning, walking down the street in some city. But what can you share with us? Because Brian always kept it very subdued on the radio, but when he would get to his boiling point and he was, lose patience, man, you could hear the edge and the anger, and you knew there was a bubbling temper underneath there. What's the most angry you've ever seen Sabes?
I probably got 3 of them for you. So I'm not in San Francisco. We're at Candlestick. It's a Friday night.
Right.
And I'm on the road watching another team play or minor leagues or something. And I'm watching ESPN. And they got, they're showing the scores and the line by line. They're, top of 8, bottom 8, top of 9, bottom 9. And I remember it vividly. We're playing Colorado. This might have been, it was Candlestick, so it was before 2000. It was 97, 98, 99, somewhere in there. And it's a Friday night. We're playing Colorado and at Candlestick, and I'm watching the bottom line, and we got a 1-run lead, 8, top 8, Colorado's hitting, bottom 8, we don't score, go into the 9th, we still got a 1-run lead. I don't see the score for a half hour. Finally, it comes in, Colorado 6, Giants 5. It was a 1-run game, may not have been 6-5. So we lost a game in the last inning. So I got an early flight. We have a day game in San Francisco. I got an early flight. There was no internet back then that you could just bring your computer in and go play by play and see what had happened. If there was, I didn't have one. So I don't really know how we lost the game. So I get in the Candlestick into the little booth we had between home and first, and Sage is the only one in there. And he's got this big bowl of popcorn, like in the plastic container on the ledge, right? And so I go, "Hey, Sabes," and he just turns around, doesn't say a word. Just turns around. I go, "Hey, I'm looking for conversation, and he ain't giving me any." And so I go, "So what the heck happened last night?" And he goes, "What the F happened last night?" And he starts getting animated, and I mean, using a few vulgar words here and there, and he takes the popcorn and he fires it out the window of Candlestick. The entire thing, so, not that we were drawing a lot of people, but somebody, it was before
in the game.
It's like 12, 15, and all of that goes down, and then he vehemently, passionately, I guess would be another word, passionately explains to me how the top of the 9th inning went. And so that was one. Another time we're in the booth, and something had gone haywire, and I'm standing behind him, and he picks up a bottle of plastic water, and he fires it over my head, and it explodes on top of me.
Oh no!
And I said, "So is that really necessary?" He goes, "I'm effing sorry, but we still effed up the game, So that was one
Danny
of the best.
Occasionally tries that as well.
One of the best was I won't give you all the detail because it would expose the subjects here. We had a player we had drafted, and we were going through a tough negotiation. And as I said, I handled like 99% of the negotiations of our top picks and of our 40-man roster, 25-man roster at least. And as we're going through this, we're not making any headway. And so we make our final offer. I make our final offer.
Matt White.
And no, I'm not telling you. It doesn't matter. I'll tell you what.
Larry.
That's your. And so the agent tells me, your boss is so gutless. He makes you deliver the dirty work all the time. He is gutless. And I says, you know what? That's probably something he ought to hear. And he says, well, put him on the phone.
Oh,
So I hang up and I go to his office and I tell him the story. And so I dial up the agent. I says, here, you can tell him what you just told me. He's anxious to hear it. And so he gets the guy on the phone and the guy tells him, and he says, I hear the guy say, and I'm going to come to San Francisco and kick your behind.
what?
And Sabe says, give me the flight number and the gate, and I'll meet you there. That was one of the best. One other candlestick one. One other, I can remember it vividly. Joe West umpiring third base. We're sitting directly up. Okay, like our view is home plate, third base, left field line, straight down the line. We're sitting, and I think Kim Batiste was our third baseman this particular day.
96.
And there's a play at, well, maybe it wasn't Kim then because he was Sage was the GM. And there's a play at third base, a steal, and he looks out. I mean, we're 200 feet away. Joe West is 5 feet away, and he calls the runner safe. And Sabes, I mean, Candlestick had the suites and the booths up there, the media booth, and we were a little bit to the right. And they had this ledge, which may have been a ribbon board or something like that. There was a ledge outside the window.
Right.
And Sabes is looking right at Joe West, but from 200 feet away, right?
Yeah.
And up about 100 feet. And he's out on the ledge with 1 foot on the ledge, like he's raising his hands, screaming at Joe West. And I had to grab onto his shirt because if he had gone another step further, not just the popcorn would have went over, he would have went over. But that was
who had the bigger temper between Sabes and Dallas Green? Because Dallas Green, I'll say this, I don't know if Danny even knows who Dallas Green is.
Oh yeah, Phillies manager. Oh yeah,
okay, I remember. But Dallas Green had such an incredible presence about him. He was a very tall man. I would say easily 6'5", 6'6", white hair, chiseled jaw, and just looked like the kind of guy that didn't take any shit at all. Like he looked like if there was an emergency going down, he's in charge. You know what I mean? Who's in charge? That guy's in charge. He looked so much in charge. He had such a presence about him. But Dallas Green also had an anger side to him that supposedly he showed many times in Philly. What do you think, Ned? You knew them both.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you're talking about these guys, I got a picture on my wall there at Dallas. I got a picture on my wall over there at Peck. I got about 3 or 4 Sabian pictures with Dick Tidrow and me. They're all over my wall here. I was in Philly. I was a sports writer at the beginning of my career, and I was covering hockey, but I also would cover the Phillies. It was in 1980 when they won their first World Series, and Dallas was the manager, and he was rough. He was rough. There may be a tape out there of him and Jason Stark that's, it's hysterical today. It wasn't hysterical to Jason then, or now probably funny to Jason today. But yeah, he would challenge you, not physically, but he would challenge you with his size and with his volume and choice of words. He would definitely challenge you. When he became the GM, he saw, and he was my first boss. He got hired in October. I got hired on January 3rd, actually, January 3rd today, which
really,
yeah, it was 41 years ago today.
Wow.
And I just thought of that. And he would use his reputation more than he would use it. And he he would get on two guys all the time. John Vukovic, who was a coach with us, and me. He'd get us on us all the time in front of the manager, Lee Ely, and the rest of the staff. And
By the way, you were Danny. I don't know if Danny knows this, but Ned was in Chicago as a PR guy when Lee Elia had his blow up. Oh, you people!
You can leave it there, Larry. You can leave it. Family show.
It's family show.
And so, he used to get on me all the time in Vuk. And I went to Vuk one day. I said, Vuk, what? We're the two guys that do, he never doubts what we do. He goes, that's just him. He knows that the other guys in the room know that if he can get on you and me, he can get on anybody.
Right.
But he was a great leader and a great guy to work for. I love the guy.
He made the Sandberg trade, didn't he?
Yeah, Sabes and him, I think, worked together for a while in New York. I think that when he managed the Yankees, I think Sabes was working there then.
Isn't it interesting that the Giants and the Yankees have this back and forth? Al Rosen was a Steinbrenner. He was an executive right there. Bob Quinn. These guys all came from New York. Why do you think that is? Do you think there's some element of the Giant organization at the ownership level that had a pipeline to the Yankees?
No, I think most of these things happened early in this ownership's tenure. Saves may have been the first year or the second year of this ownership. Al was before this ownership. Bob was at the beginning of this ownership. So I'm not sure. I think it was just, I think maybe New York wore people out.
Yeah.
And so, the boss had a lot of success, but the boss could be tough on people, loyal to everybody, but also tough on people. And I think that probably led people to look for opportunity elsewhere from time to time. But, I spent far more time with Sabes in Dallas. I spent a ton of time with Dallas, but nowhere near as much time as I spent with Sabes. I don't know if I spent in my career, more time with anybody than Sabes.
Yeah, I mean, you guys seriously, a lot of people felt like you guys sounded similar. I always could tell you apart, but there were many people who would be like, I can't tell those guys apart. Glass half full guy says $4.99. Ned, can you please explain why it takes so long to get contracts done instead of being knocked out in under an hour? What is the fastest deal you ever did? At whether it be San Francisco or LA, where you didn't either with a free agent or because sometimes you got to make a quick pivot, right? And that's part of being light on your feet.
The free agent thing is never going to be quick because it's the agent's job to really not take the first offer, not take a deal, try and get a better deal, negotiate, understand the market. So those are never going to be quick. And, some agents believe that if they have enough of the market, that the last player standing is going to get paid better than if the last player standing is signed earlier. So, part of negotiation is patience. And you got to be able to have patience with it. There's a bunch of qualities, your research, your preparation, your ability to listen, your courage to say no, your respect of timing, but also patience. You have to be patient. And that takes time. And it takes really knowing the other side too, and how they operate and how they think. It's all invaluable stuff. But unless you're signing a player that has no negotiation rights, like a first-year player or a minor leaguer just added to the 40-man, yeah, those can take 10 minutes, 15 minutes. But that's because there's no negotiation. There's no leverage. It's either do this or, go get a job in whatever you majored in college or high school,
Yeah. Two questions. I got quick ones here for you. Giants, who knows what they're going to do the rest of this free agent market or trade market. They're probably going to do something. There's a couple guys who we played in LA that I want to get your thoughts on. One is AJ Pollock. I could definitely see Pollock and the Giants getting together. He can play a little center, not every day, but he could play in a pinch, and he could play a corner outfielder. He's a right-handed hitter. I think they're probably looking for a right-handed hitting outfielder. What do you think of Pollock as far as what he's got left, where he's at? Can he still play center at all? And then the other guy that I think is kind of a sleeper guy that's that I want to get your thoughts on. And you know me, I always like the sleeper guys, but I'll tell you the guy who's really interesting to me, he's only 29, is Edwin Rios. And I just think Edwin Rios can really hit. And the Dodgers have so many guys, and it's like I just feel like he gets lost. He's gotten lost in the shuffle. He's not old. I don't know about his conditioning level or his defensive ability, but I like the bat. Give me your thoughts on Pollock and Rios.
Well, I think we should go back to something we talked about a little while ago. You got to check the medicals on both. Okay. I like them both. And I saw AJ play a lot, both in Arizona and then when he came to LA. He had a tough year last year in Chicago. And from time to time, he's got a hamstring issue. You got to check on that. You got to understand it, and you got to know exactly who you're getting. He can play, and he's a smart player. LA had so many star players. He was under the radar a little bit, but never could you discount what he could bring to your team. Again, I haven't really seen much of him last year, so I'm a year out saying this. I checked the medicals, and I had a lot of respect for him, and I think his aptitude for the game is at a high level, and he may still be able to play some center field, but I don't know if you can run him out there 140 days a year. Rios, I was a little bit surprised that he was let go. Huge power. I mean, big time power.
Lefty power.
Missed a lot of time in the last couple of years. Defense, yeah, he can. He's not gonna hurt you out there, but he's not gonna get any Gold Glove votes. But he's somebody, again, you got to check the medical on. And I sensed that he would be a far cheaper sign than AJ would. Rios is probably, as much as anything, going to look for the opportunity to play and to have a team that he could compete with and make. AJ is probably going to be a little bit more financially driven because he's obviously had a long career of success. So I think those are really how I would grade out both those players.
Last chat one, and then we'll let Danny throw one more, and then we'll let you get on with your night. Robert Boyd says $5. Ned, what happened with you and the San Jose Sharks? Ned, the Sharks treat you well?
Well,
Are you still scouting for the Sharks?
I'm still with the San Jose Sharks. I'm not sure what Robert's talking about there. Yeah,
well, he doesn't know. He doesn't. He just heard that you were with the Sharks and figured maybe with Doug Wilson moving on.
Yeah, I do a lot of scouting for him, and I've had some great conversations with Mike Greer. I think he's going to be terrific. And,
the general manager.
Yeah, I think.
How different is it to scout hockey versus MLB? And are you looking at AHL, or are you looking at strictly NHL, like pro, like almost advanced work? Are you looking for prospects, trades? What is the nature of your scouting? There's all different kinds of scouting.
All players for acquisition, NHL, AHL. In hockey, you have players that you draft, that teams draft, that aren't in the AHL or the NHL yet. Some are playing college, some are playing juniors. You got the World Juniors going on right now. Some are in Europe, some are in the United States Hockey League. So you've got a whole collection of another 700 players that a team has the rights to, but they're not a pro yet. And so I spent a lot of time on those teams, those types of players who play for contenders, as well as the entire group, but really kind of focusing on the contenders and also the NHL and the AHL. I had the Metro Conference for a long time and the Atlantic for a little while, a combination of the two. And now I'm more Pacific driven, more West Coast driven. But enjoy it, love it. How you scout it. It's some ways far different than baseball, but many ways the same. When I look at a player in any sport, I start with the feet and I work my way up. How do the feet work? How do the hands work? Soft hands, hard hands. How does the mind work? You're talking about in every sport that we watch, there's a million emphasis on one-on-one, whether it's basketball and Steph Curry taking a shot on a defender, whether it's the Niners with a quarterback and a defensive back, whether it's a pitcher and a hitter, whether it's a forward and a defenseman, a forward and a goalie. There's all sorts of one-on-one competition. How good is the decision-making? How fast is it, especially in hockey, and how accurate is it? And how do they play? How do they play when the team struggles? How do they play when it's easy? How do they, not that it's ever easy, but how do they play when everything's clicking and everything's going well compared to how do they play when you're going through a tough time? Those are all characteristics, except for, and I could use the speed of decision making with a hitter and a pitcher. You want to know how much time a hitter's got? Take a book, hold it out, drop it from the time it leaves your hand till the time you hear it hit the floor. That's how much time a hitter's got to make up his mind. So you got all these different things, but I could almost describe either sport without putting a title on either sport and describe what I just did. And you would think it was baseball. You would think it was hockey.
I'm a big fan of the Sharks defenseman Ferraro.
Yes.
He's a good player, isn't he?
Yes, he is. Young player. Somebody that had some injuries last year, one in particular, but he's got a great makeup to him, great character to him. Not an offensive player, but really a kid that has really grown to. My first year, I went to my first training camp, and Doug Wilson actually said, "So, who do you like out of these young guys?" And I said Ferraro, not because he's Italian, but because I liked how we played.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I like, the football players are great to talk to. I think the only thing better might be the NHL players because they're just, when you're legitimately tough, when you're literally drop the gloves and go at somebody any night of the season, you don't need to fake tough. You don't need to be fake tough. You can just be. So those guys become these incredibly great interviews, down to earth, real guys. They're not trying to boast or, try to fake like they're tough guys. They are tough guys. They're legitimate tough guys. And it's, I don't know. I think there's a code in the sport that makes it interesting. There's a camaraderie around the players, a respect, a standard that, they play to a standard. And if you don't play to that standard, you don't fit in. I just think that the room is really an interesting room. Especially, they don't get a lot of media coverage in the Bay Area, and nobody in the radio ever talks about them because it just kills the ratings. But I'll tell you, they're great interviews. They're the best guys to interview.
They are, they're a special breed. I've always known them as a special breed, and you nailed it on a lot of accounts. They are difficult. They are tough. And when I say difficult, I mean they are tough to get out of a game. It's always interesting when you get to the playoffs and you look at when a team gets eliminated the next couple of days, what players are going in for surgeries. Some of them major surgeries, but they're not going to get out of a playoff game. They'll play with broken jaws, they'll play with broken fingers, they'll play with all sorts of ailments that most athletes would say, "I'm out."
You got to see an oral surgeon and they're out there going back out there.
I mean, in most teams' locker rooms, there's a dental chair.
Who was the guy, the Sharks captain, who took it in the mouth, and his teeth are falling out, and he's skating to the side, kind of. It's like what? Your whole mouth is falling apart. You had to have oral surgery. It was the guy who played Pavelski. Pavelski got hit in the mouth, and it was ridiculous. All right, Robert Boyd says $5. Ned, I actually didn't know you were still with the Sharks. Glad you're still with Team Ned. All right, Danny, you got one or two last ones for Ned on the way out?
I've kind of got a quick two-parter here. I took a little flack about a week ago on the show when I said Giants got a lot of money, but they don't have a lot of assets as far as players to trade. How about if the Giants trade for Trevor Bauer and pick up a prospect from the Dodgers with the intention of releasing Bauer for publicity purposes? And you should have seen the chat went crazy, but I wasn't suggesting they take Bauer. But at this point, could you see the Giants doing that? And two, is anybody going to take a chance on Bauer, you think?
I hope you have another question, Danny. I'm not getting into Trevor Bauer.
Yeah, don't.
I just didn't know he's being reinstated. Obviously, I think the Dodgers will probably release him. But I was just thinking maybe the Giants could pick up a prospect just for taking his contract on and then just, release him, because I don't see him being with the Giants. I don't think that would be a good PR move for the franchise. But another question real quick. Giants have made a lot of signings this offseason with the opt-out, with a 2-year contract with an opt-out. Now, that can go either way. It can work well for the team if the player performs well and you get something out of him, maybe you get a playoff push. But it can also backfire. If the guys don't perform, now they're going to opt in, and you've got them for another year, and you've got a lot of salary on the books because they didn't perform. So you're really dealing with possibly 2 rough years if they don't perform. How do you feel about these type of contracts?
Then you ask a lot of negotiation questions,
Danny wants to be a GM.
Yeah.
No, good question. I think that, and I gave an opt-out here and there. I signed Zach Greinke because of an opt-out. You have to be prepared. If it's a 2-year deal or a 3-year deal and you're given an opt-out before the end of it, you have to have it in your mind before you get involved with that conversation and that deal. You're okay with 3 years. You're fine with that. Okay. And you may use the opt-out as a incentive to do a deal, but you make the decision that whatever the duration of the contract is without the opt-out, that you're fine with that you would do that deal. 3-year deal with a 1 year with an opt-out after the first year, or an opt-out after the first and a second year, or like Zach, a 6-year deal with a 3-year opt-out, which he used and went to Arizona and got paid even greater.
Right.
I was fine with that. And sometimes I would use it not only as a leverage to get a deal done, because I thought it would be enticing to Casey Close's agent and to Zach. But in that case, he was 51-15, I think, with us. It's pretty good years.
He did real well with the Dodgers. Yeah.
But I was actually okay with it because, in a pitching situation, you've got X number of throws in that arm, X number of starts. So if somebody wants to take a chance, give us the chance to make another decision, continue to have them, not have them. I was gone by the time the 3rd year expired. I'm okay with that. But I had to be prepared to pay for 6 years too. And if you have a 2-year player with a 1-year opt-out, which a lot of guys have signed lately, I'm cool with that too, because I would have given him 2 years. I know I'm going to give him 2 years. He wants to leave after 1. We'll see how it goes. At least he's going to have to produce for the 1.
Right. And that's a good thing. That happened with Rodon last year. And,
I said this. I love the short-term contracts. I thought the Giants in 2021 season, what the big key to that season that nobody really talked about was the percentage of players who had the carrot dangling that off season. And it was just like they had a very motivated team, and it showed. Ned, we're going to let you go. Awesome stuff. We could talk ball with you all night. Happy New Year, my friend, and look forward to talking ball with you throughout 2023. And hope everything that you wish for 2023 comes true to you. And we definitely appreciate you joining us and talking Sabes and telling some stories. And man, we're going to have to turn a couple of those into highlights, man, because some of those were funny as hell.
Our 45-minute shows, really, we get a lot into the 45 minutes, even if it is an hour and 45 minutes. I wish you guys the best. I love being on. The fans of San Francisco, I love you. And always be a special part of my career. The Sabes part will always be my best quarter of the 40. And being up in San Francisco and having a chance to see the growth of the franchise from the Candlestick days to the new ballpark. New ballpark is 23 seasons in now, I think. But, always special to me forever. So thank you, guys. Thanks for continuing to have me on once in a while.
Great.
Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Ned. Happy New Year to you.
There you go. The great Ned Colletti. Let's do this, Danny. Let's pay the bills, and we'll come back and have a couple final thoughts and read a couple chats, and then call it a night on the Krueg Show. But first, a word from our sponsors right now.
Larry Krueger here for Telmetrics. Thanks to Casey Bateman and the good people at Telmetrics. If you're an occupational therapist, if you're an orthopedic surgeon, a chiropractor, a physical therapist of any kind, Telmetrics is designed for you to use in your practice and will greatly benefit your patients. Telmetrics uses computer vision and artificial intelligence and provides a platform for outpatient rehab therapy services, both in the clinical and the telehealth environments. So using Telmetrics can improve your patient's experience and much more. So for all your sports injury needs, or if you're a physical rehabilitation specialist of any kind, make sure you use telmetrics.co, Telmetrix.co. And thanks to Casey Bateman and all the good people at Telmetrics for being a proud sponsor of the Krueg. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Dan Coach Emilio. Dan is a buddy, and he is a phenomenal retirement planning specialist. And you can contact him today at securemoney.com or at his number, 925-628-9966. There's a lot of uncertainty in our world right now, and you want to make sure that your money is secure. That is the key. Danny's got 25 years of experience, born and raised right here in the Bay Area, and he can help you get an immediate 10% premium bonus on your principal retirement account. So give him a call, 925-628-9966. He'll make an appointment with you, and you can sit down. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of a deal. He'll consult with you and come up with a strategy to get you going to where you want to be. Once again, 925-628-9966, securemoney.com on the web. And thanks to Tony Casera and the good people at Casera's Italian Menswear. They are housing the Krueg Show t-shirts, and they're a proud sponsor of the show as well. The Krueg Show t-shirt, the Krueg Show podcast t-shirt is available there at their store in Dublin. Their address is 7372 San Ramon Road in Dublin, California. And go see Tony Casera and get yourself a Krueg Show t-shirt and support the show. And special thanks to our sponsor, New York Style Italian Sausage. That's right, NewYorkStyleSausage.com is their website. Phenomenal product, whether it's the breakfast sausage, the Italian mild, the Italian spicy, the chorizo. You cannot go wrong with New York Style Italian Sausage. Once again, NewYorkStyleSausage.com. Often imitated, never equaled.
We grew up with a Sunday dinner. That means no matter how busy you were, no matter where the hell you were, you came to dinner on a Sunday night. Yeah, Sunday dinner without sausage, it's like a church without God. You know, how can you go to church if you don't believe in God? You know, and along with the sausage also became the discussions. That was discussion night. You know, it wasn't a typical family that you sit there and you're quiet, you know, and you don't talk with a mouthful. Oh, no, man. Italians talk when they're eating. Italians even talk when they're sleeping. And definitely we talk with our hands. So if we can't express it through our mouth, through our lips, we express it with our hands. So, and that's what sausage is, really. It's an expression, you know, that life is good.
So New York Style Sausage was started over 70 years ago. We are the largest producer of fresh Italian sausage on the West Coast.
What makes our sausage in New York style is really the recipe came from back east, from New York, you know, from Connecticut.
If you look at all of our labels, there's maximum 4 or 5 ingredients, which we're really proud of.
There's no preservatives, no MSG, fresh in, fresh out.
The pork comes in fresh, goes out fresh. There's never any freezing throughout the process. We've always used fine quality cuts. We're never gonna deter from that. It's one of the reasons why our sausage is so good. I guarantee you put our sausage up against anybody else's from a flavor standpoint, no one will beat it, hands down.
Hey, do yourself a favor and do me a favor. Go buy a package of the New York style Italian sausage. Guaranteed you will love it. Guaranteed.
Hey Pasquale, Dan Coach Emilio here for the Krueg Show. Just picked up for the very first time some of your New York style Italian sausage here at Sam's Club in Arizona. My wife just cooked it, and I'm about to take a bite. Man, this is good. Pasquale, when you winked and said you guaranteed we love it, you're right. This stuff is absolutely amazing. Best sausage I've ever tasted. Thank you, Pasquale.
All right. Welcome back to the Krueg Show. Larry Krueger, Dan Coach Emilio with you. We had Ned Colletti on today. Hope you enjoyed, Ned. Let's go to the chat. Let's go to the chat.
What are the chat?
Let's go to the chat. See what the people in the chat have to say. All right. What do we got? Jay says, don't squeeze the Charmin. That is a very astute point. Very astute. Val Ramos says, love that one, Dan. Thank you. Justin Kerwin says, Jenny Vega says, Justin Kerwin, I'm busy all day talking baseball. Maybe it's Jenny and Justin hooking up in the chat. Here we go. We go back to Justin. He says, Jenny, keep drinking that Kool-Aid. You will be a huge shock. You'll be a huge shock of a losing season again. Oh no. Is Jenny like a believer that they're really good?
I think Robert Rothberg and Jenny might be linking up somehow.
Hey Pasquale is stuck in my head all the time. You want a Hey Pasquale? I'll give you a Hey Pasquale. Let's see if we can get a Hey Pasquale. Nothing better than the beginning of this.
Hey, Pasquale. Hey, Pasquale.
You like how I
Hey,
lean?
Pasquale. Dan Coach Emilio.
Does like a circle. It's gonna.
Hey,
Hey, Pasquale. Dan Coach Emilio. Hey, Pasquale.
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff. All right, let's see. What else do we have?
Hey, here we got to hear it. Hey, Larry.
Hey, Larry.
Giants.
Larry's always an asshole. Have you noticed that? Eddie K says, hey, Larry, do you think the Giants in 2024 will celebrate that year as an anniversary season for the park? 24 years at 24 Willie Mays Plaza. It's a good question.
That's
That is a
interesting.
very good
Rather
question.
than the typical 25 years or...
Look at this one. Return of the Shogun. He says, Dan inspiring me to wear Under Armour in my later years.
Yeah, do I got Under Armour in? Yeah, Under Armour
Yes,
again.
yes,
Yeah.
Dan looks sporty.
Most of my
There's nothing wrong with being sporty.
yeah, most of my stuff's Under Armour. Just it's hot down here. I don't like anything.
The only thing is,
cumbersome.
do you use Bounce?
No,
Otherwise-
you're not supposed to use fabric softener on these.
But don't you get static cling?
No, these are made out of what do you call it? Stuff. What is it?
Polyester?
Yeah, or is it polyester or whatever it is? It says right on there, don't use fabric softener.
Is there anything worse than static cling?
Oh yeah, that's
Gets rid of static cling?
I guess fabric softener, right?
I don't know.
But yes.
Justin Kerwin, Larry, great interview with Ned. Again, an hour again with him. Yeah. Oh, Ned, we can go on and on and on.
I'll say this about
MF says Ned's a legend.
Yeah, I'll say this about the Giants and Farhan. I'm not thrilled
Rothberg,
with
the
a
Giants
lot of
will
his
prevail.
moves,
Great.
but I want to be proven wrong in 23. I don't like the club as it sits now. I hope I'm dead wrong. I want to see the Giants win.
Oh, we all want to see him win.
Yeah, but
Come
if I'm right, I don't want to see this continue down this year after year. I want a Ned Colletti running the organization.
Oh, I do too. Jay says losing seasons are fun seasons. We get to hear Larry's rants. By the way, just signed a contract today to do a Giants podcast with a former Giants player on the Believe network. It's going to be video and audio. It's going to be at least once a week, maybe more than once a week. I don't want to tell you who the former Giant is just yet, but it's going to be a former Giant and yours truly doing a Giants podcast that we will have on this show and also on it'll be carried on the Believe Network, BLEAV. Just signed the deal with them today, and we'll be doing the onboarding within the next week, and we should have our first edition of this podcast within the let's say 10 days, 2 weeks. And we'll be doing a regular Giants podcast. So for those of you who want me to be, one of the things that I've really enjoyed doing this year is I love doing the interviews with the 49er players in the locker room. And we're going to try to continue that into baseball season. So I think it's going to be really, really good. I think it's going to be really good. And I'm sure, because I am somewhat outspoken, I'm sure there'll be some players that don't want to talk, and that's fine. But we'll be in there. We'll be in there doing our thing this year. Look for it. So we got this one from Jay. He says, I want to hear passion. When the Giants lose, Larry gets passionate. Thank you. I agree. I want a little passion in my sports talk. Hell of this, hell of that. Nice, Larry. Robert
when Ned
Rothberg,
was telling those stories.
I hope you're wrong. Well,
about me. Yeah, he hopes I'm wrong because Robert
Romo
is
2001. Way to go, Larry. There we go.
I was cracking up inside to myself when Ned was telling the stories about Sabes losing it. I was thinking, could you imagine ever Farhan stepping out over the window again?
He just started giggling. Do you know who my backup quarterback is for my fantasy team? I got him in the 11th round. MF says Larry will bring some good mojo to the Giants. That's the hope.
Did you ever see the
He says Javi Lopez would be smooth like fine wine. That would be good. Javi would be definitely very, very good.
Yeah. One of the funniest things out there on the internet is
Danny, did you re-up yet? Your tickets. Justin Kerwin wants to know.
No, I have not. There's still a little bit of time.
Danny's waiting.
Time is ticking before the Giants take my license back, my seat license.
You might be the only driving force for change. Everybody else around this team who's covering it is like, well, I think they're done, and I think they're really improved. What are you smoking? They'll be lucky if they can hold off the Diamondbacks and the Rockies.
Exactly.
Lucky.
But yeah,
lucky.
Pretty much. Yeah.
J.E. Olage says, fucking do it, Larry. Interview those guys. You're a beast. Thank you. Maybe I'll introduce myself. Excuse me, Brandon Crawford, do you have a few minutes? I am a beast, and I would love to interview you. Why are you a beast? Because J.E. Olage told me I'm a beast. It will be on YouTube, Larry. There you go. Javi does a great job in the booth. I'm a huge Javi fan. Huge Javi. I'm not confirming that it's Javi. Could be anybody. Could be Jeff Juden, the man they call Sasquatch. It could be Jeremy Affeldt. It could be Hunter Pence. It could be Brandon Belt if he decides to retire. We don't know exactly who it is just yet, but we will be getting an ex-Giant. And it should be starting in the next week or two, and we'll have that ex-Giant with us shortly thereafter. And check it out on the Believe Network. We'll promote it on the show. We'll tell you all about it as it actually comes out. There'll be an audio form, there'll be a video form, and we're trying to do maybe 2-3 episodes a week, but maybe it'll just be one a week. Ryan Terrio is another one that I really love. I love Terrio. Maybe Terrio would be good. MF says Affeldt is a legend on his KMBR hits.
Oh,
Are you kidding me? I love talking to Affeldt.
Yeah, Affeldt's great.
Affeldt's
Robert Rothberg, I want to hear from you in the chat because I've been reading your chats about how this Giants team is going to make the playoffs. You're the same guy that said they would make the playoffs last year at the All-Star break, said they're going to have a great second half. This team, quit being so negative. This team is loaded. Here you are saying the same thing again. I want to see how much money you're putting on the Giants this year to make the playoffs. I want to know if you're.
We're all rooting for it, but there's a difference. Can we just connect? I don't know. Are Danny and I the only ones who can separate rooting from reason? I'm rooting for the Giants to
like
win.
Crazy. Absolutely.
But I have this thing between my ears, and it helps me reason. and there's not a lot in there, but the reason that I need to see the same way I reason through things, I need to see reasons to pick the Giants to do anything.
Yeah, if you look at this logically,
Who's at first? Who's the center? Who's at second?
Yeah.
Who's at third?
Yeah. It's kind of like Abbott and
How's
Costello
Rodon
there.
going to be replaced? Who's in the pen? Are they done? I mean, who's the
Here's-
center? If it's all status quo with what they got, they're cooked.
It is status quo, except
They're cooked.
here's what they've done. They've added Conforto and Haniger.
I like.
And subtracted Belt and Longoria and LaStella. Everything else is the same.
Yeah.
Except and
Which
they've
is a
added
major
pitching that lost Rodon.
major gamble on health
Oh,
because
big gamble.
well,
You got
Conforto
a guy
didn't play at all last year.
You got a guy in Conforto who had a really good season in 17, 18, 19. Didn't play in 2020 because of COVID. 21 had a down year and sat out all of all of last year in 22. And you signed him not really. Think about it. Cody Bellinger, who's 27 years old, had shoulder surgery and messed up his swing and never really has been the same. Michael Conforto is coming off shoulder surgery. He's older, and he's coming off a down year prior to the shoulder injury.
It's funny. I just not you mentioned Bellinger, and I saw a quote. I saw people attacking you the other day when you were talking about the Cubs. In a lot of ways, the Chicago Cubs had the off season that I was hoping the Giants would have.
Oh yeah,
Do you have their list, Danny, in front of you?
Yeah, yeah.
As
They
far as
got.
they picked up Jamison Talion.
Yep.
They picked up Dansby Swanson.
Yep.
Cody Bellinger.
Yep. And
They're on the
look like
verge
they're
of
gonna get
picking up
Hosmer.
Hosmer. They picked up somebody else for the pen, I thought, and maybe even somebody else after that. But I would have been totally happy with Dansby Swanson, Cody Bellinger, Jamison Talion, that kind of an off season. But instead, we're looking at Stripling and Manaea.
Oh, and they got
Manaea's coming off a
Smiley.
bad year.
They got Drew Smiley too.
Yeah, they got Drew Smiley. They re-signed him.
And they got
They got somebody else though for their pen, I think.
let's see.
Oh, they got a catcher, maybe, didn't they? Or they lost Contreras.
I'm looking at it right here. They got Barnhart, Trevor Barnhart.
Yeah, Tucker Barnhart.
Or Tucker. I mean,
Yeah, Tucker Barnhart's a
Yeah.
great defensive catcher. Would have been a
Yeah.
great guy to pair with Joey Bart.
Also, they
And
got
then
Brian
Jameson Talion's a
Boxberger.
big, strong right-handed pitcher. Could have been a real good anchor sleeper pick. I think would have been really nice. Bellinger would have been phenomenal. Because I think he, especially with the carrot dangled, on a
Right.
short-term deal. I would have even
One-year
given him a
deal.
2-year deal with a 1 year out. So, opt out. And then Dansby Swanson, probably was the shortstop that signed the most reasonable deal of the offseason. I mean, the Cubs have the offseason that the Giants needed to have.
Yeah, I thought I made the point. Yeah, and some people attacked me about that. Because they got all stuck on Hosmer. Hosmer's nothing to. If he doesn't work out, you just waive him. Yeah, he hit 275. Lamont Wade hit 207. Okay,
And who do the Giants have at first base? You can't slough off Hosmer and then say, well, I'm looking forward to Lamont Wade. You're just a fucking homer. I mean, seriously, if you're singing the praises of Lamont Wade and ripping Eric Hosmer, you're a joke. You're a total joke. You're a total homer joke. One guy's got 4 Gold Gloves and hit 277 last year. The other guy hit like 195 and is a minor leaguer who's a terrible fielder. So don't tell me that Hosmer sucks, but you loved Wade. I mean, I'm a Giants fan too. I want them to do well, but I'm not just going to sit there and say every move they make is a genius move, because what's your pivot point when they suck? You're just going to sit there and go, I was wrong? No. I mean, it's like if they make a move I like, I'll say it. If they make a move I don't like, I'll say it. And then you'll know the difference, because what I say what I mean. So if I like the move, doesn't mean it's going to be a great move, but I'll give you my honest opinion. And if I honestly don't like it, wouldn't you rather me honestly tell you I don't like it than lie to you and tell you I like it just because the Giants did it? I mean, come on, people. Seriously.
Right.
I think
I mean,
at the end of the day, I want people who cover the team to be somewhat honest and somewhat objective. And I
Right.
get the feeling that there's very few people who cover this team who are honest and objective. I get the feeling there's an awful lot of people who cover the team who are just like, I'm just going to say anything so I can, ingratiate myself to the players and have everybody say, oh, here comes that guy. We love him. Do you want to be loved, or do you want to have use? I mean, do you want your words to have meaning? I don't want to sit there and say the Giants are great if they're going to be horrendous. I mean, I don't get it. I'm not seeing, and maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before, but I don't see why the Giants. I heard, I retweeted this morning, if you follow me on Twitter at Sports Larry K, Harold Reynolds, John Paul Morosi, and Matt Viscursion discussing the Giants. Viscursion thinks they're improved. What? You lost Carlos Rodon. You replaced him with Stripling and Mania. That's not an upgrade. You lost LaStella and Belt and Longoria, and you're getting Haniger, who played 57 games, and Conforto, who played 0 games. If anything, that's a projection.
Yeah, potentially, if they play to their past standards of a couple years back, yeah, they'll be better there. They'll have.
I just don't get it.
But
okay, here we go. Rothberg's in the chat. He says, Larry and Dan, I would love to propose a question. If you were a present player on the Giants, would you feel that your team can contend? No. I mean, no. I mean, do you know the Padres and Dodgers are in your division? Arizona's younger, more athletic. Look at it this way. Arizona and Colorado are younger than the Giants. Young players get better. Older players don't get better. So what are the Giants? Giants are an old team that just signed more old, hurt players. And if they're healthy and everything breaks right, potentially they could be maybe as good as they were last year, which was 500. Come on. The Rockies and the Diamondbacks have a slew of young players all coming up. That Zach Veen outfielder that Colorado has is a better outfield prospect than anybody the Giants have. Diamondbacks have 5 or 6 young players that are considerably better than any young player the Giants have. So I think the Giants are headed towards last place in the division, or maybe second to last place. I don't think they're better than the Dodgers or the Padres or the Diamondbacks. And I think
they're not better than
shocked if they finished last. I would not.
They're not better than the 3 top teams in the NL East, the Mets, Phillies, or Braves. So where's the wild card going to come from?
Where's their depth if they even have just normal injuries?
Yeah,
okay, let's just go look at the Giants and then factor in 2 or 3 guys to be hurt, which 2 or 3 guys are always hurt.
Correct.
So go look at their roster. Tell me 2 or 3 guys that are going to be hurt, and then who's going to replace those guys. And then, come back and tell me you think they're a contender.
If an outfielder goes down, you're probably looking at on the roster, Elliot Ramos coming up,
who hit 212 or something in AAA last year.
I'm looking here. What? This can't be right. It's got to be an old 40-man roster. This is old. I'm looking. Why is Tommy LaStella still listed on there? And he's
DFA'd, but he's still there. He's still on the roster.
I'm on the Giants page, and it's always updated. And they've got Casali on there and Kerwin Cash. How does that happen? How does that all pop up old?
Maybe you're looking at an old website. MF says Larry and John Lund have the best podcast. Oh, thank you, MF. Johnny Lund, check him out. John Lund Unleashed, I believe it's called. But Johnny's a good man. Go. I would encourage everybody to follow Johnny and his podcast. Anyway, that's going to do it for us. Good live stream. We got this one from Jay. Says, I hope Haniger and Conforto and Stripling and Mania can be dealt August 30th. Well, we shall see. We shall see. Hopefully the Giants aren't done.
Well,
Hopefully they'll do some more.
Hopefully they're in the race and doing well. Otherwise,
Hopefully they'll make a
yeah.
trade.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll get a trade going. They could definitely use a trade. All right, Danny, good stuff. Good questions for Ned. Hope everybody enjoyed it. Thanks to Danny. Thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to Ned. We're back tomorrow night after Warrior basketball, talking Warriors hoop tomorrow night. Hopefully Frank will join us. See if we can get Cyrus in the house. Rye will be back with us. Hopefully we'll have some Niner sound from Santa Clara as well. It's all coming up straight ahead. Hope you enjoyed the day on the Krueg Show. I was with Grant Cohn earlier today. We'll put out some highlights from that, and we'll also throw out maybe a couple highlights of this over the next 24 hours. Hope you enjoyed it. Danny, we will see you tomorrow.
Awesome. Have a good one, everybody.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't need to hassle. Yeah, we ain't never fall back.